What starts as a pretty simple foreclosure dispute can sometimes, well, it can spiral into a huge legal battle that starts questioning the very power of our courts. Today, we're going to unpack a case where one homeowner's fight for their house really put the entire justice system under a microscope. So let's just get right into it.
Right at the heart of this whole complicated legal fight is a very, very real number, $305,000. For the homeowner, Jeremy Bass, this wasn't just some abstract figure. It was his life's equity, just hanging in the balance. And that really highlights the massive personal stakes involved here.
And believe me, this isn't just about the money. As one civil procedure expert put it, the core issue here strikes at the integrity of the justice system itself. The argument is that the court's overreach didn't just bend the rules, no, it fundamentally broke the entire framework that's designed to protect a person's right to a fair appeal.
Okay, so to really see how a routine case went so sideways, we're going to follow the timeline. We'll start with the initial foreclosure and then look at this pivotal affidavit that changed everything. Then we'll dive deep into the core jurisdictional challenge, trace the domino effect of that single error, and see how it all ended up in a fight for the very right to appeal. And that, of course, raises this huge question of precedent for the future of justice.
So it all kicked off with what really should have been just a standard foreclosure case involving homeowner Jeremy Bass. But as we're about to see, one single procedural move after the initial judgment, it turned this local property dispute into a major constitutional showdown.
In that key event, it centers on this document, a post-judgment affidavit. Now, an affidavit is really just a sworn written statement. But when this one was submitted and how the court decided to use it, well, that became the central battleground for the entire appeal. The timing here is absolutely everything.
Let's walk through this timeline together, because the sequence of events is so critical. So December 6th, Bass testifies he can't live in the property and the court accepts it. Done. Just 2 days later, he files his notice of appeal, and this is the moment right here where jurisdiction begins to shift away from that trial court. A final judgment is entered on December 16th. Okay, then, a month later, the affidavit is submitted. And here's the stunning twist. On February 10th, the court uses that very affidavit, which was filed long after its authority should have been limited, to basically go back in time and declare Bass's entire defense frivolous.
So you might be asking, why was this document even submitted in the first place? Well, it was a purely defensive move. The other side kept claiming Bass was somehow profiting by living in the home rent-free during the case. This affidavit was just meant to prove he was actually paying for other housing, directly pushing back against their story.
And this, right here, is what brings us to the absolute core of the appeal. Bass's legal team argues that the court's use of that affidavit was a massive overstep of its authority, its jurisdiction. Their whole argument is really built on 3 key legal doctrines.
So first up is something called post-certification jurisdiction. This is a fundamental rule. Once an appeal is officially in motion, the trial court basically loses its power to make big, significant rulings on the case. It's divested of authority. Any major action it takes after that point is considered ultra vires, which is just a fancy Latin term for beyond its powers. The argument here is simple. Using the affidavit to make a whole new frivolousness finding was exactly that, an action way beyond its powers.
Second is the law of the case doctrine. You can think of this as a rule against judicial do-overs. A court can't just change its mind on a conclusion it has already reached. Remember, way back on December 6th, the court accepted Bass's testimony that he wasn't living in the home. The appeal argues it was totally improper for the court to then go back, revisit that same fact, and suddenly declare it was evidence of a frivolous defense.
And the third argument, it draws a really sharp line between the legal merits of a case and its economic consequences. A defense is either legally valid or it's not, right? Whether the person is suffering financial hardship, like having to pay for another place to live, that's totally irrelevant to the legal strength of their case. The appeal claims the court made a huge category error here by treating evidence of Bass's financial hardship as if it were proof of bad faith.
Now, building a case on jurisdictional arguments like this is an incredibly smart legal strategy. Why? Because these arguments are just so powerful. You can raise them at any time, and the standard of review on appeal is de novo, which means the appeals court looks at the issue with completely fresh eyes, no deference to the lower court. A win here doesn't just change one little ruling. It's like pulling a card from the very bottom of the deck, and it can cause the entire negative outcome to just collapse.
So, this jurisdictional error, it wasn't some minor mistake that happened in a vacuum. No, it set off a devastating chain reaction, a procedural domino effect that ultimately led to the homeowner losing his property while his appeal was still pending.
And this illustrates that chain of events perfectly. Look, it starts with the court improperly using the affidavit. That leads to the finding that the defense was frivolous. And because the defense was deemed frivolous, the court denied Bass's request for a stay, which is basically a pause on enforcing the judgment while the appeal is heard. And without that stay, the writ of restitution was executed, and he was physically kicked out of his home. One error cascaded into the ultimate terrible consequence.
This created a really stunning evidentiary paradox, a true catch-22. The affidavit was submitted for one simple reason, to prove financial hardship by showing Bass was paying $875 a month for other housing. But the court just completely flipped its purpose, weaponizing it as the primary evidence to declare his whole defense frivolous. The very proof of his hardship was twisted into the proof of his bad faith. It's wild.
So you see, the fight on appeal isn't just about reversing one decision for one person. It has become a battle over much larger constitutional principles, and really the very meaning of the right to appeal.
So why does this case matter beyond the people involved? Well, because it's about protecting the right to a meaningful appeal, one that isn't made totally pointless before it's even heard. It's a fight to stop courts from changing the rules after the game is over, and to make sure due process is respected for everyone. So given those stakes, the relief requested from the Idaho Supreme Court is, as you'd expect, pretty comprehensive. The appeal is asking the court to vacate or just nullify the frivolousness finding, to declare it void. It asks the court to then reconsider the stay without that tainted finding, to step in and prevent more injustice, and, importantly, to preserve Bass's right to seek damages for being wrongfully removed from his home.
This all puts a really critical choice before the Idaho Supreme Court. Its decision isn't just going to affect Jeremy Bass, it has the potential to set a powerful and lasting precedent for how jurisdictional boundaries are respected in the entire state.
You know, there are a few ways this could go. The court could grant direct relief just by vacating that frivolousness finding. It could go a step further and order a full reconsideration of the stay request. Or, and this would be the most impactful, it could use this case to set a clear, binding precedent on these jurisdictional limits that would end up protecting countless people in the future.
When you boil it all down, the entire complex case really comes down to this one crucial question. Can a person's fundamental right to an appeal be effectively canceled out by strategic procedural timing and a court just plain exceeding its authority?
And so, that's what we're left with, this fundamental question. It's a real test for the rule of law itself. Will courts act as the essential guardrails they're supposed to be, enforcing these boundaries to protect our rights? Or will they allow those rights to just be nullified by our procedural trap? The answer, whatever it is going to echo through the justice system for years to come.